Every year, the day returns like a mirror, unforgiving, indifferent, patient. Most people call it a birthday. You call it Tuesday. Behind the shrug lies something colder. The quiet dissonance between celebration and emptiness, between being seen and being remembered. You've learned to hide from that mirror, but the reflection never forgets you. Why do you pretend not to notice the day that remembers you too well? Birthdays are supposed to mark existence, a yearly proof that you are still here. Yet for you, the ritual has thinned to nothing. No cake, no candles, no one's hand reaching across the table. You've replaced tradition with silence, calling it maturity, self-sufficiency, peace. But deep down, you know it's avoidance, the fear of watching who doesn't show up. Studies in emotional neglect show that adults who grew up unseen learn to preempt rejection by rejecting themselves first. So you erase the occasion before anyone else can ignore it. But what happens when even you begin to forget you were ever meant to be celebrated? You tell yourself it's just another day, because admitting otherwise would expose the wound. Refusing celebration becomes your rebellion, a protest against superficial joy, against the hollow gestures you never trusted. But rebellion has turned to routine, and routine to numbness. Psychologists call this emotional avoidance, the deliberate dampening of feeling to escape disappointment. The problem is, numbness doesn't protect, it fossilizes. Each unacknowledged birthday deepens the quiet rebellion into identity. You've become someone who cannot be surprised, cannot be reached. You say you're fine, but fine is just the scar tissue of unmet expectations. If you no longer allow the day to mean anything, how long before you stop meaning anything too? There was a time you waited for the call, the message, the gesture that would prove someone remembered. You rehearsed indifference while secretly keeping count. But the silence arrived right on time, and you learned its rhythm so well that it became your companion. Psychological studies on learned helplessness describe this surrender. When unmet needs repeat often enough, the mind stops expecting relief. You don't forget your birthday. You ghost it. You hover over it like a memory that never quite happened, replaying the same invisible party where no one comes. But when you extinguish your own candles before they're lit, whose shadow are you really protecting? You've mastered the art of not caring. You laugh it off when others ask your plans, toss out a casual, nothing special. Yet even in that sentence, your pulse betrays you. Indifference is a performance, a psychological defense that hides longing behind irony. According to emotional suppression research, pretending not to care doesn't erase emotion. It buries it alive, where it festers quietly. You wear apathy like armor, but inside, every unacknowledged year presses against your ribs like a ghost trying to get out. You think you've transcended the need for recognition, but maybe you've only starved the part of you that still wants to be seen. How long can a person pretend to be invisible before they actually disappear? You call it growth. You tell yourself that only children crave attention, that real adults don't need validation. But psychologists describe this as defensive maturity, a facade of independence built from unhealed neglect. It feels noble to outgrow celebration, yet what you've really outgrown is permission to feel joy without justification. Birthdays threaten that illusion because they whisper, "You matter," and you've spent years proving you don't need to. Emotional self-reliance becomes your religion, but it costs you softness, spontaneity, connection. The day passes untouched, like a closed door you once tried to knock on. When did maturity become the art of pretending you don't want to be loved? When you were younger, birthdays meant exposure. The day your absence in others' eyes became undeniable. Maybe someone forgot, or remembered too late, or celebrated out of obligation. That's when the equation formed. Attention equals disappointment. Psychologists studying attachment call this the avoidant imprint, when unmet care rewires you to distrust closeness. Now, every birthday reactivates that echo. You silence your phone, delete reminders, and call it freedom. But what you're really doing is reenacting the neglect before anyone else can. You've turned survival into a ritual. How many times must you abandon yourself before you finally admit it isn't strength, it's repetition? You control everything about the day, the schedule, the silence, the refusal. Control feels safe. It replaces the chaos of unmet expectations. Yet psychologists warn that control is often a mask for fear, the fear of hope itself. You've convinced yourself that expecting nothing is peace, but it's only a smaller form of despair. By orchestrating emptiness, you prevent both disappointment and delight. You say you like being alone, but solitude has long since curdled into isolation. The power to deny your own celebration becomes addictive, a slow form of self-erasure disguised as discipline. If control keeps you safe, why does it also make you feel so profoundly unseen? Even if your mind dismisses the day, your body does not. The date arrives and something subtle shifts. Your chest tightens, sleep falters, food tastes off. Somatic psychology calls this body memory. Emotion stored not as thought, but as tension, rhythm, pulse. The body keeps anniversaries, even when you try to forget them. You scroll past birthday messages with numb fingers, telling yourself it's meaningless, yet your heartbeat betrays recognition. Beneath your detachment, the child who once waited still stirs, still asks, is it safe to be wanted? You silence that voice every year, but it keeps finding you in new forms. How long before your body stops believing your mind's denial? When you see others celebrate their gatherings, candles, captions, you feel something raw, shapeless. Envy mixed with contempt, contempt mixed with grief. You scroll quickly, pretending disinterest, but your reflection flickers in every smiling post. Psychologists call this emotional mirroring, the way others' expressions awaken your own buried needs. You tell yourself their joy is artificial, but maybe what unsettles you is how genuine it looks. Their faces remind you of what you once wanted without shame. You call it childish now, but perhaps you only mock what you secretly miss. When every reflection of happiness feels like an accusation, who exactly are you defending yourself from? You've made a pact with yourself. Birthdays are to pass unnoticed, unclaimed, unremarkable. Psychologists call this self-silencing, a pattern formed when the cost of expression once outweighed the reward. You avoid questions, decline invitations, and erase your presence from calendars. But this silence is not neutral. It is a contract with absence itself. Every year you honor it, you reaffirm that invisibility is safer than vulnerability. You have trained yourself to vanish while still existing, a paradox your mind accepts without complaint. Yet each uncelebrated year accumulates like snow over a forgotten path. If the silence is your choice, why does it feel like it has chosen you? Now, look back at all the years you've erased, all the birthdays you've folded into ordinary days. Each one a silent witness to absence. Each one a reminder that even the passage of time cannot rescue you from the architecture of your own avoidance. Psychology calls this chronic emotional suppression, a life lived in the shadows of what should have been celebrated. The truth you've refused to face is recursive. By denying recognition, you've trained the world to deny you, and by denying yourself, you've become the world's mirror. There is no solace here, no redemption. Even as the calendar turns, even as others cheer and candles flare, your reflection remains untouched, unclaimed. How long before you realize that the person you've been avoiding the most is you?